Hello everyone, welcome back to The Walk. I'm Jake Donnelly, and this week we'll be discussing what it's like to raise a child that the world doesn't understand. As always, this is a space for raw, honest and non-judgmental conversation. Thank you for walking alongside me, and if you're a first-time listener, then thank you for jumping on this walk and this journey. I hope there's something in here that resonates with you, so let's jump straight into it. Like I did last time, I'm going to start with a bit of a story just to give a bit of a background on what it's like raising a child that the world doesn't understand. We were actually I wasn't there. My wife had actually taken my son Sol to the Royal Children's for a appointment. And at that appointment, if anyone's ever been there before, you go into these big waiting rooms and it's massive, and they've got meerkats, enclosures and all that stuff there. So if anyone has been there, they'll know exactly where I'm talking about. And there was a child who was quite loud and loud and boisterous in that waiting room, which is like, again, it's fantastic to see kids like that. But this child was quite confrontational to Sol, and he was very interested in how Sol looked and was very, very curious. And then my wife was telling me this afterwards. The child sort of came up to Sol and had a look a few times, said some sort of whispers to his older brother, and his older brother sort of just pulled him away and said, just leave the little boy alone. He's just, trying to enjoy his time here with his family. And the little boy then moved the conversation towards quite loudly how Sol looked, and actually called Sol a monster. He said, "You look like a monster." And to be honest, thank God I wasn't there. I don't handle those situations very well. It's something that when she told me, I was full of rage and angry, but Sol's response to the child was, "I am a monster. I'm Grover from Sesame Street." And I think the beauty in that is probably the innocence that we are dealing with at the moment. Sol's quite oblivious to how he looks. He's oblivious to what the world perceive of him and think of him. And I think it's probably the easiest time for us right now as parents, having to deal with, obviously, the facial differences and what comes with it. I've spoken about it previously in episodes prior, where people take Sol on face value, and you just want them to know your kids how you know them, and know that they're just normal children, what we would call normal. But yeah, that we deal with this a lot more than people realise, but very grateful that Sol's oblivious to it. But yeah, when I did hear it, I was full of rage. But I then realised, and I came back to it, like, children are just unfiltered, and they say things and see things exactly how they are. And that child's perception, like, I can't hold that against a child. I don't even know what age he was, but when he said that, his older brother immediately grabbed him and took him back over to the parents. And I think in that moment, I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, where are the parents? Like, I've had Sol before say a few things, mainly about sort of family members or people out in public. For some reason, he's learnt this word chubby, which for me sort of triggers me a bit, being body conscious and younger. And I got picked on because of my weight, not because of how I looked, I suppose, aesthetically in the face or anything else. But when I hear him say that, I sort of pull him up on it. And it's not a scolding session. It's more just, we don't judge people on how they look. We judge them from what they are internally. And it's such a tricky space to navigate, especially if you are a parent with a child with needs, or a child who does look different or act different. I have in the past, when I was younger, and I would have probably said some things, not older actually, when I was younger, I probably said some things to some people, but that I regret, and and I think that we all have done that in our lives. But having Sol really put into perspective for me. But I've always been one to, when I see, whether it's a child in a wheelchair or someone who's in a vegetative state getting pushed around by their parents, I just feel so sorry for the parents and also the child, because that's all they know, and they must cop it a lot. And now, being in those shoes, I understand how hard it is, and that's why this episode's theme around raising a child that the world doesn't understand is, it's sort of, there's beauty in the darkness as well. Like Sol doesn't see himself the way the world sees him, but I carry a constant weight, and I think my wife handles it a lot better than I do, but I carry a constant weight that one day my boy is going to see himself the way the world does see himself. And that is the scariest moment thus far of my parenting journey, is preparing myself, and my wife also preparing herself to have that conversation with Sol. And I think it's more around educating. That old saying of sticks and stones will break your bones, names will never hurt you. But I think it's never been more truer than when you're in this situation. It's really about teaching your child who they are and to be proud of who they are. No matter how they look, how they act, what they've got going on, I think every child should be proud of who they are, because it's such a beautiful thing being a child, and there's so much innocence and beauty behind it, and unfiltered rawness, which I'd love to have Sol on here one day. Actually, I just don't know if the conversation would flow as I would hope it would, but I think it'd be a beautiful thing, just so that you guys can actually see him how I see him, because he's such a beautiful boy. What people see versus who he is a massive thing, and it's something that you battle with as a parent. In public, it sort of varies a lot. There's a lot of stares, glares, comments, laughing. I've had that a lot of times where not older people, but like older kids even. Like, in my opinion, if you're over the age of, say, 15, 16, you should know by then what's right and what's wrong. And there's been a few times where I've held people accountable that I shouldn't have, probably. But that's just who I am. And children will point, and I think because they're unsure of what they're looking at. And that's same with parents and people and humans. Like, we've had some family things where the family have actually been present during times where Sol has been judged on how he looks. And it's crazy to see how the family deal with it. They take it with so much pain and so much anger. And I totally agree with them. And I've been there. I'm there every day. But what they don't realise is they get that small glimpse into our world, and then we deal with that every single day. So they go back to their normal day-to-day life, and we have to deal with it day in, day out. We have had moments where parents have brought kids over. I had one moment which sort of blew me away a little bit, actually, which was we were at where we were living, we were down at Wonthaggi, and there was a father with two boys, and it was busy. Like, you got to understand, we try to avoid, or I do personally try to avoid the shops and everything when they are extremely busy, because it's so much more stressful. There's so many more stares, glares, questioning. You're always on guard. I kind of feel like I'm his bodyguard the whole time I'm there. And that's something that, again, is working on. It's part of the healing. It's part of the journey. But there was a time where we were at Woolies, and these two young boys saw Sol, and they literally stood right behind him and were looking at him and pointing and laughing to each other. Now, I think they were brothers, young brothers. They would have only been 7 or 8. And the father saw it happen, and he grabbed them and took them immediately out of the aisle. And I was obviously, you become numb to it, and I was quite deflated. But I don't show that to Sol, but I was quite deflated. But anyway, as we were still in that aisle, the father, unbeknown to me, did a big U-turn up the other aisle, came around, and he goes, "Is that your son over there?" And I said, "Yeah, it is, mate." I said, "Is it the one that your kids were laughing at? That is my son." So all of a sudden, I'm already confrontational. And it's not that gentleman's fault. It was just, I'm a protector, I'm a dad, I'm on that front foot. And he goes, "I just want to let you know I am extremely sorry about that. And my boys I've told them off around the corner. I want them to come and apologise to him. Is that okay?" And I said, "Well, I only want them to apologise if they feel the need to apologise." And he goes, "Well, I've got a daughter at home who's got severe, I think it was autism or something." And he goes, "For my two boys to do that to your son breaks my heart." And he was almost in tears, this dad. And at the time, I was just full of rage, and I was thinking to myself, well, fucking yeah, they better say sorry. But reflecting on it soon after, I probably should have just shook his hand and gave him a hug, because he's someone who's in the trenches as well. And then again, his children see it every single day, and they still didn't know how to react when they saw Sol. But, they're the sort of stories that people don't see. And they're the things that obviously as we progress as parents and Sol progresses through his adolescence, we need to, I personally need to be better with it. And when those moments do come where there is an apology or something, they're few and far between. So it needs to, I need to take on board what that parent's saying and, and be more sympathetic and empathetic with that parent, because he's going through the same thing. And if Sol did that to his daughter because she's in a wheelchair or she's yelling or she's screaming or whatever it is, whatever type of condition she had or how she looked, I'd be fuming. So they're the things that we have to work through. It's a really difficult space to navigate, and some people do want to ask, some are too scared to start the conversation, and that's completely fine. I just think people don't know how to react when they see something that they're not used to, and that's completely warranted. Like prior to having Sol, I was one of those people, and I think my wife was one of those people, and our family were all those people who didn't know what to do or say. But who he actually is, like I said, is completely different to what people see. Like, he's so beautiful. He's intuitive and he's so intellectually advanced for his age. He can hold conversations with adults better than most adults can hold between one another. And I think he's probably a young boy who's confused as to why he can't do normal things that other people do. I know that, like, when we were having Atlas, he said, when Atlas comes, this is prior to Atlas's birth, he would say things like, I got to do my drops in my eyes so I can teach Atlas how to do his. And they're the little moments that break you as a parent, because you think that's all he knows. He doesn't realise not everyone else needs eye drops. He has started asking why he needs to do his drops more often. He's been asking that question a lot more. Why he can't go into certain places when it's bright. I touched on a story about the Christmas lights situation, like, that feeling of he's never going to be able to see them just breaks your heart. And I think he's starting to notice that Atlas can do a lot of things that he can't, and navigating that space is extremely, extremely tricky. But he's just got such a gorgeous nature. And I really want people to see that, and I want people to understand that. And that's that constant advocating for your child. You want the world to see your child how you see them. And I think, unfortunately, they're not going to. But hopefully conversations like this will allow people to become more aware and actually try and see who is the person behind that face, who's the person behind that condition. Like, they've still got a heart, they've still got a soul, they've still got a purpose. It just may be that their journeys are a lot different. Dealing with complex medical needs is extremely hard. From a parenting point of view, there's really no roadmap out of it. And we're dealing with a condition that the doctors have never really had to deal with before. I have had one lady from the US whose son's got the same condition reach out probably late last year, and she actually sent us the details of the gentleman who found the mutated gene that Sol has for his condition, which is SENS, scalp, ear and nipple syndrome. But I think I've just been too worried, or my wife, maybe we're a bit too worried to actually get into the nitty gritty of it and see what it actually entails, this condition, and what it's going to look like for our son moving forward. Like, we have been told that, there's a 50% chance if he has children that he'll pass it on. If we have another child, this was prior to Atlas, that there's a 0.00001% chance it would happen to us again. But they said we would have told you that, before you had Sol. So it's one of those things that you never prepare yourself for. And I think if you do worry with that at the back of your mind, you're not going to enjoy the pregnancy journey. Like, my wife prepared for every scenario, and I've spoken before, I just thought I was going to have a textbook birth, textbook child. But it's thrown a lot of things into perspective for me, and I'm starting to see that I'm rather, and I don't want this to get taken wrong, but I'm quite grateful of what has happened, because it's allowed me to grow up extremely fast. It's allowed me to almost have a midlife crisis at 30 or 29 when we had him, and really know what I want out of life. Because I feel like if we had had if we had say Atlas first, or Sol was same as Atlas and didn't have any health issues, I'd probably be still living where, in the areas that I grew up in, doing the same shit with the same people, hanging out. And don't get me wrong, I do grieve a little bit of that, because I do wish I had that connection with a lot more people, and with my son especially, growing up with other kids and people who I grew up with kids. But I am also extremely grateful that it's sort of put my life into perspective, but I do not wish it upon anyone. So it's such a tricky thing to, I suppose, deal with and to come to terms with. But it's something that is extremely hard because there is no roadmap out of it. We had no idea what he had prior to his birth. It was just the moment he came out, it was, you're left in the dark, no answers. We didn't get the diagnosis till 18 months to 2 years, after he was born. And at the moment, it just feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And what people don't see is your life plans are constantly put on hold. Like we're trying to move at the moment. We're considering moving interstate, but then it's, he's got a surgery coming up in a couple months, which is daunting. We haven't even told him yet because we don't know how to tell him with his really bad anxiety I've spoken about previously. But your life plans get put on hold, and I do envy at times, and I've got to catch myself and pull myself back to reality, but I do envy at times the people who are around me who do have children, who have the ability to just, like, if they wanted to, pack up their lives and move back to Queensland tomorrow. And I wish we could do that, but we just can't. Like, I've even got my brother-in-law and hopefully my soon-to-be sister-in-law, his partner up there, who we would love to go and see, but like it's one of the brightest places in Australia, so it's extremely difficult to try and get up there and make the most of it because we're trapped indoors here. I don't want to go all the way up to Queensland just to be trapped indoors there. You do start to grieve, and I have touched on this, but you do grieve a lot about the life that you once imagined. So I grieve it every day. I'll be completely honest. There's moments. It's not like I'm down in the dumps every day, but I do grieve in moments. Like I'll see things, or at the moment I'll come home and he's sitting there just looking through the window out at the world, and it kills me because I just want him to be out there. He's so curious about the world. And when we were having kids and we were thinking about having children, I started to think about, going on trips to Bali, going on trips to, Europe, and being outdoors with my kids and kicking the footy, or, doing whatever, having a picnic in the sun. And we just can't do those things at the moment. And I don't even consider it anymore because it's so hard, and it almost makes me upset when I have to think about it, because that's all you want to do. You want to enjoy life and enjoy the world with your kids. So when I do speak to people and they say, I took the kids overseas and it was an absolute nightmare and we're parenting in an even more difficult environment, I just think to myself, consider yourself extremely lucky because you can do that. And we can't. And I think there's a lot of parents who are in the same boat as us who don't get the same opportunities. And I'm sure if you're listening, this resonates with you a hell of a lot because it is extremely difficult. Like I said, planning our next home, we're constantly looking at houses with tree coverage, a big shed so I can set it up so that, the soul can play at least outside. I can set up a playground inside. I can build him a cubby house, whatever it may be. Obviously, once the back's better. But it kind of feels like our future's been held hostage by his condition. And that's something that I'd have to deal with day in, day out. And something that is, you do grieve it a hell of a lot. Real grief starts to happen, however, when it's those surgery days. So when he does have a surgery, and this is probably more targeted at the parents who go through this time and time again, it's not really the medical side of it that is tough, it's the human side of it. So he's had multiple procedures since birth, some as early as a few days old, which I've touched on in previous episodes. So if you go back to episode 2, you'll hear a lot about Sol's journey, and throughout these episodes I have discussed this, but he's had 2 major surgeries so far. He's got another one coming up in June, and the days leading up to it are rough, but the night before is some of the hardest moments you'll have because your kid goes to sleep and you know what he's going to be or she's going to be going through the next day. And you also need to prepare yourself mentally for yourself and your partner for the next day. And that is so hard to do because that's your last, like I always think of it now, like when he had his first major surgery, it was like, he's going to be sweet, he'll be out. It was 14 hours. We waited and waited. And then they said, can you both come up? And we went in there and he's having trouble breathing and we've kept the tube in and then he ended up going into a coma and we found out he had a stroke during the surgery. So you're constantly bombarded with all this shit. And the issue with obviously conditions like Sol's one is it's constant trial and error by the medical team. Like we had a meeting with them about a month ago, 2 months ago, leading up to this surgery. And we said, we're thinking of moving to here, or we're thinking of planning our next house, purchasing our next house here. And they were kind of like, oh, okay. And it was almost like, oh, okay, I probably wouldn't go there, or I probably wouldn't do that. And I said to them, well, what's it look like after this surgery? Is it going to be something that is, you're going to see him in 6 months, you're going to see him in 12, like this one, you haven't seen him for a year and a half. So we've had a year and a half of bliss, and now we've got to prepare ourselves for this. And they're like, we don't know, it's trial and error. And it's extremely difficult just to manage and just to plan and just to be able to move through life with the purpose you intended for your family. So when he did have his first surgery, and I've again touched on this before, but I will go through this again. When he did have his first surgery, you go in as confident as you can. But yeah, when we found out he had the stroke, which means that oxygen didn't get to his brain for a period of time, and then they said he may wake up, he may have lost part of use of his body, he may, to be honest, it was more just like, we actually don't know. They threw all these scenarios, and it was like, well, let's just wait till he comes out of it, because he was in a coma for, the better part of 2 to 3 weeks. There was so much uncertainty about it when he would come out, and again, I'm at work dealing with all this. Like I took a couple of days off to be there, but then I was back at work. And lucky at the time, the boss I had was fantastic. I was working out in Sunbury. So he would say, just come in the morning, do 7 till 11, whatever, go to the hospital. But we were staying at the hospital, so I was getting ready for work. And that was some of the hardest moments, was walking from, I think we were at the Ronald McDonald House, and I'd walk from there to the car park of the hospital to hop in my car and go to work, and my son's in that building. And there were so many times I just didn't want to get in the car. I just wanted to go up and see him and hug him and kiss him. And it is a very, very tough road to navigate. You become numb a lot of the time. There's moments of hope, and then you're shot back to reality. I think at one time, like he hadn't gone to the bathroom, they're like he may get a distended bowel or distended bowel, whatever it was. So if that happens, and we have to cut him open while he's in this state and work on him. And like I said, you're just constantly bombarded with like shit left, right, and center. But then when he woke up and came out of it, it's probably one of my biggest regrets. Like I was at work at that time, and they brought him out of it, and my wife was there, and she was on her own. And when he came out, he was like a little puppy. He was scared, squealing. And I think because that whole time they said to us, he knows you're here. In that coma, he knows you're here, and he's probably going to be very scared, wondering why mum and dad haven't picked him up and hugged him in so long and been with him. And they're moments people don't see behind closed doors. They just see he's had a surgery, he's now home, fantastic. But if you're a medical parent, I know how hard it is. And props to you and hats off to you. And it's only going to get harder for us because now we've got Atlas, our second child, and I don't know how we're going to navigate it. You want to stay up in the room with him, but then you got Atlas, and Atlas is still feeding, breastfeeding, so we're trying to wean him off. And there's so much pressure, there's so much anxiety, and there's so much uncertainty. It really did break me as a man. It breaks me a lot of the time. I'll catch myself a lot of the time crying in the car. Where we were living, I had long drives. I would constantly just, have days of tears or days of silence or days of anger, days of uncertainty. I still have a lot of days of emotional breakdown over it because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if this surgery is going to be the one. And when I say the one, I mean the one that, takes our boy away for good. You just don't know. And that's the tricky part to navigate. But I suppose it's about working through it and coming out the other side as a couple. That's the main thing. You got to work through it as a couple and come out the other side. And that's something that we've been doing. We work extremely hard on. And when we do have our moments of worry, grief, uncertainty, it's about sticking side by side. And that's what my wife and I do better than anyone. And we've started to realise that the family and stuff aren't ever going to understand it. They try to, and I love that they do, but they're never going to get it. Leading up to the surgery, though, in June, the feelings towards that are hit and miss. So you forget about it a lot of the time. He was actually meant to have it in before Christmas. Then it was meant to be in March. Now it's been pushed to June. And you know it's because his best interests are at heart. And again, it's made our decision so much more difficult. But some days it really does get to me, especially if I've not been present a certain day, or, you know, you're tired at the end of the day and at the moment in pain and constantly in pain, and you might not, you know, your painkillers have worn off because of my back injury, and I sort of get a bit, snappy and short and sharp. And I think, you know, I lay in bed sometimes, I just cuddle him and I kiss him, and he's in bed with us, and I just cry. And I cry and I cry. And I don't shame away from that. Because they're the moments that allow me to regulate what I'm feeling. But then other days I don't feel it as much. But there's always a lingering feeling there. There's always the fear of the unknown, the fear for his well-being. And it just drains you so much, drains so much energy. And it feels like it ages you so much. Like I feel like, you know, in the conversation with Jaden, I said, I feel like I'm 90. And it just ages you. You're so exhausted all the time, so tired. You wake up in the morning, you spring out of bed, and by 12 o'clock you're exhausted, you know, with the drops and his meltdowns and the adjusting of light and everything that comes with it. It's such a hard space to navigate. And now having Atlas is even harder. And that's, again, something that we try to make sure that Atlas doesn't miss out on moments with Sol. But also moments that he enjoys, and you know, you really do have to split up your time as a family, and it doesn't get any easier. It hasn't gotten any easier. It's just gotten more manageable. And again, I think that's from a partnership and a marriage and a relationship that works, and it's worked through trial and error, just like Sol's condition. It's trial and error because we've never had to deal with this ever in our life, and now we have to. So some of the hardest things, though, with having a child with complex needs, and I've talked about this before in an open letter, is there's a system that we have as Australians that's actually set up to fail us. And it's got to do with government support, NDIS. I truly believe it's a system that's set up to fail. And I know that it is because of how many stories I've read, how many people I've spoken to, but also how many people I've spoken to personally who were a part of it when they were going to roll it out and said, this won't work. And like I've touched on before, they've said to us that Sol doesn't have an eligible disability. And we have been battling with them for 4 years, constantly battling with them. They change the rules every month. And they do it because they want you to just give up, and so that there's more funding that they have in their pockets. And it's a vicious cycle. And it's affecting so many families. Like, his condition is permanent. Regardless if they do surgery and put eyelids on him, he still has vision impairment. He's still got these scars. He still had a stroke during his surgery. They're things that you can't take away from my son. And I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there who have similar things that you can't take that away from their child, but you're constantly getting them to advocate for permanence. And it fucking blows my mind how that is the norm here in Australia, the lucky country, as we call it. With everything else going on, you can't give children quality of life. He does have learning difficulties due to his condition. He's very intellectually switched on, but learning difficulties due to his vision impairment. His anxiety, there's so many things to unpack with him, but it's almost like that's not enough. It almost feels like I have to take my son and lie to a doctor or lie to someone and prove that he's got some form of autism, so that we could get some funding. And that's not right. Like, it should be a case-by-case basis. And these are things that we and a lot of families around Australia are constantly dealing with. And it does become exhausting having to advocate for your child and advocate for their permanence. You get tired of explaining, but more than that, you get tired of having to, like I said, advocate for your child. And now my wife handles a lot of it. I don't, because I've said some things. Two people on the phone that, and again, I'll always say it, I don't regret, because they have no idea what we're going through. And these are people who've never met your child. They'll never meet your child. They don't know what your day-to-day is like, what it is that you guys go through as families. And I've hit breaking point many times before, where I've just exploded at them over the phone and made some threats. And again, like, I don't shy away from it. I don't give a fuck, to be fair, because it's for my child, and that's my protector mentality. Now, I'm working very hard on responding, not reacting. Would I probably have responded a bit different? Yes, I probably would have. But at that time, when you're under immense pressure and exhaustion, like parents who have medically complex children are, it's extremely hard to stay composed every single day. And it's an accumulation of everything. Like, he's little, he shouldn't be judged on how he looks, but he also should be given the quality of life that every other child gets and every child should deserve. And it's, like I said, it's a system that's set up to fail, and a system that needs to get better, because I'm seeing it affect so many families, and especially even children with autism. Like, the funding is getting cut. Their rights are almost getting stripped away from them. And you ask the question and they can't give you an answer. I'll speak to this person, speak to that person. Every time you call them, it's a different person. It's like a fucking merry-go-round of a shit show, is how I would put it. And it's getting to the point now where I'm more than happy to speak more openly on this, but also more than happy to seek some legal advice and go down a legal route in order to hold them accountable. And I wish if I had the money, or if I had the funds available, that I could start my own scheme like they have, but actually case-by-case basis with families, or set up something where we have a team of people who actually go in and advocate for your child. So you don't have to. We come and meet your child. We come and meet you in the home. We see what your day-to-day is, and we go in and help you, because they say that they do that, but they don't. And it's fucking bullshit. Moving back into the Soul, the questions he's starting to ask is around sort of school. He wants to know when he's going to go to school and how school will look for him. And that's something that's tricky. I don't want him to go to school, and my wife doesn't either. Not because of how he looks, but we always agreed that both the kids would be homeschooled, because I don't agree with the system and what they're teaching kids right now in the school and the educational system. I don't agree with it one bit. I think there's things that kids should know, but there's a lot of things that kids shouldn't know. And I feel like we're playing on their innocence, because we know that we'll get the answer and the response that the society wants. You know, you should just be able to learn the basics. You don't need to be knowing about, I won't go into it. Maybe that's another episode where I will go into that educational side of things. But he's starting to ask about why he has drops all the time. Questions sometimes why Atlas is outside and he's not. He's, asked about his scars. Why have I got a scar here, Dada? And the one across his head sort of disappeared, or not disappeared, but it's covered by hair now. And then, he's asked me, like, what did that boy say, Dada? Or what did he say about me? And so hard to sit there, because you just want to, let him know that he's just a young boy and he's curious. But yeah, it does get pretty hard and tricky to navigate. And it's heartbreaking to explain that to your child. Heartbreaking to try and explain to them why the world perceives them as different when you just perceive them as a beautiful, young, innocent, gorgeous, natured human being. I don't think you can ever prepare for it. It's probably more just around educating your child about it, is the thing that we're trying to do the most. And the educating them is so that he becomes confident in himself and who he is. I think as young people, my generation and stuff, we didn't really get educated on who we were. Like, I remember being a fat kid, or a chubby kid, as they would call it. And I got bullied heavily. And my parents, they didn't know a lot of what went on. Probably partially my fault. I sort of probably held a bit from them. But at the same time, they wouldn't have had the tools that we have now to educate our children and show them that you're greater than what you think you are. Your worth is so much. And I believe everyone has something to give. It's just the environment and the education that they receive depicts or determines how they see themselves, view themselves, and conduct themselves. What he has taught me, though, however, is a lot. And he's taught me so much. He teaches me every single day. He's so intuitive. He's so intellectually switched on for his age. And, what's normal for him, which is doctors, scans, procedures, constant medical appointments, seeing an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, seeing all these things, it isn't normal for any other child that I know. In our circle, in our group, I don't see it happening for any other child. But he handles it with so much strength and grace, and more than any adult would, more than I would, but more than any adult around me would. And he's taught me so much about resilience so much about perspective, so much about patience, which is one that we're still working on, but he's taught me so much about it, and probably just loving life for what it is. And he honestly inspires me daily. Like when I see him out in public, and it'll be something so simple like putting him in a trolley to push him around a supermarket. He doesn't get to do that often. He's the most excited kid, and he sits there and he does this thing with his hands, like a stimulation thing. And he's, he starts laughing really loud and gets all excited. And, in the early days, I was like, like in my head, I'm thinking, please don't draw attention to us more than we already have. But now I'm just like, he doesn't get to enjoy this, so let him enjoy it. And that's something that I've changed and shifted that mentality so that he does enjoy those moments more. The thing that I find, though, that rare disease or rare condition or medically complex parents go through that people will never understand is you'll never understand the burnout, the exhaustion, the worry, the fear, and the unknown that we go through every single day. And that's okay. You don't have to. But don't ever try and compare, and don't ever try and know. Don't ever try and know. I hate when people try to relate. I hate when people try to know. You've got no idea. The exhaustion, the burnout, it's a different type of burnout. And it's burnout in some of the most loneliest times you'll ever go through. Our life, and all these other parents' lives who go through it, our life is not normal. Or it's not what a normal, we would say, life would be. There's no holidays. There's no taking your kids overseas. There's no leaving the kids with someone to go and enjoy your night. There's none of that. Being a parent going through what we go through is the most selfless thing in the world. And when you do something, you feel so selfish. And I think a lot of parents would take for granted what they're able to do with their children and the time they get to spend with their children, the quality of time they get to spend. And the ability to be able to go and do anything with no repercussions. Like, I don't want to hear, and I'm sure there's other parents here, like, I don't want to hear, if your child doesn't have anything going on, I don't want to hear how shit your weekend was because the kids were busting your balls at the shops while you're trying to get something or do something. Now, I can relate to that and I can understand that, but you're lucky to be able to go out and do those things. So it's more being aware, if you do have someone in your circle or a family member or whoever it is going through it, being more aware about what conversations to have with them. You don't have to go in and ask the nitty-gritty about their child's condition. You don't have to go in and feel sorry for them all the time. Try and remain as normal as possible. When I say normal, I mean just have a laugh with them, enjoy it, enjoy that coffee. But if they do seem a little bit distant or they do seem quiet, or you don't hear from them for a while, cut them some fucking slack, because it is an extremely difficult space to navigate. Closing this out, I wanted to speak probably to the parents who are in a waiting room right now, whether it's their child has already got a condition or they're just sitting in the waiting room and found out their child has a condition or a medical need and they don't know how to deal with it. It's okay to be scared and it's okay to cry. It's okay to not want to be there and wish you could escape this reality. I've been there before. I always thought it was a bad dream someone would wake me up from, and I've learned very quickly it's not. But it's okay to want to escape that reality. It does get easier, but it also gets harder. Those early moments seem like they're the hardest moments when you first find out and you need to navigate. They actually become a lot easier. It gets harder the more that the longevity of it and the more blows you take as a family and as your child takes, the harder it gets. But my advice is it's about being a team, standing side by side through it all, crying side by side through it all, and holding that space for your partner and more importantly for your child. If I had to speak to Sol right now, or even just with the idea that one day he'll hear this, and I have done an open letter before, but touching on this whole entire subject, to Sol, I love you. You should be proud of the person you are. Always be yourself. And what I want you to know is being Sol, or Sol being Sol, is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in life. I love you, my boy. I'm Jake Dunley, and this is The Walk.